Happy New Year and welcome to the first episode of 2022. We're already 2 years deep into this decade, my goodness gracious. And today we're going to look at the future by looking at artificial intelligence. What does artificial intelligence mean for marketers and in particular how we produce content? I chat with Andy Lambert, Director of Growth at ContentCal. ContentCal are a software provider that help marketers plan, schedule and analyze their content. They're working on an artificial intelligence product at the moment. So when I saw Andy's post about this on LinkedIn, I just had to get him onto the pod. We talk about what artificial intelligence actually looks like for marketers and what it practically means for how organizations create marketing content. Is AI the doomsday for a range of marketing roles, or does it mean we can create better content? We cover this all in this episode. Let's get on with the chat. Hi Andy, how's it going?
Very well, thanks, Chris. You all right?
Yeah, good, thanks. What part of the country are you chatting from?
Just outside of Reading in Berkshire. The glamour.
The glamour, absolutely. Yeah, I'm in London today. I'm starting to go into London more, probably once or twice a week. So I'm checking out co-working spaces. Currently in King's Cross.
King's Cross. Okay.
Yeah, it's quite a nice little hub around here. God, it's changed over the last 10 years. My goodness me. So, but yeah, thanks for grabbing the time. I know you're busy. You know, growing the company and everything, and keeping yourself busy day to day. So, but it's good to take a bit of time out. I wanted to have a chat because we've known each other for a few years now, and doing a lot of chat on LinkedIn, and see your content drop in my newsfeed on LinkedIn, which is great to see. And you put something in which maybe we've just had to reach out and say, look, it's time to catch up with Andy and have a chat. And that's basically about AI, and let's talking about kind of how will AI impact on how we produce content or plan and produce content this decade. So before we do that though, let's a bit of an intro for those people who don't know you.
I'm Andy. I'm one of the founding team of this company called ContentCal, which is a content marketing platform. We used to be a social media agency before we decided that we got fed up with building content plans on spreadsheets.
Sounds familiar.
Yeah, I bet it does. Because we got sick of that, we thought we could build it better ourselves. An interesting time of my moving from being an agency into being a software company, which was quite a painful transition over a few years. But as a software only company now, we have about 30 to 40,000 users in about 140 countries, 3,500 customers. It's grown fairly well, and this is a very interesting and timely topic to talk about. To dive in, Chris.
Nice one. So just tell me a bit about what you did a shout out asking for people if you're interested in early access to a platform. So what's that platform?
It's something. It's still a working title, to be honest. So it's really early days, and it's that whole kind of like build in public type of thing, right? So
nice.
Products are so much better if you get other people who potentially will use your product earlier on, and it's definitely a learning from when we first launched ContentCal, where we built something. We're like, build it, they'll come. We know that with content, right? Build it and they don't come, right? So this ContentCal IQ thing, the working title, I was like, let's just see what the interest is like, because we're about to open up for closed beta access just to gauge users' reaction. We'll talk more about what it is and AI in general, but and it was very interesting that the post did really well, because lots of people started commenting on it, both to be interested to test it out as you were, but also displaying a really healthy degree of skepticism. And that's what you want, right? In the early days. You want everyone to go, oh yeah, it sounds incredible. Sign me up, take my money. You want people to go, sounds good or too good to be true. But also, how is that going to impact my job? Because, right, I have lots of copywriter friends. I have friends with content marketers like you. And And of course, like the power of AI, how it's going to impact all manner of roles over the next 10 years is going to be, and beyond, it's going to be massive. So
Exactly.
yeah.
Yeah, it's and I think it's really interesting because it's, you know, I always tend to err on the side of optimism, the fact that actually is using technology to make your job easier. And you might have to evolve your job, some more than others, but I think ultimately, technology is there to make your, one's life easier. And you just roll with the punches, don't you? And you adapt, you change, and you thrive, etc. Blah blah blah. But I think, so for me, it's really interesting, kind of saying, okay, well, technology is advancing at such a pace and so much more than it was last decade. You could even argue so much more than it was 3 years ago, 4 years ago. That it's like, right, let's look at this decade and go, right, well, actually, what role should AI, artificial intelligence, have in the planning and in particular production of content? What's your let's unpick that a bit. What's your view on that?
So let's go back and think about like AI in general, because there's quite a bit of like nuance towards underneath what AI is.
Yeah.
So yeah, well, we're not going to make this into a nerdy AI masterclass, that's for sure.
Yeah.
I wouldn't be the guy to deliver that. I can.
Yeah, me neither. Yeah.
But if we think about it more broadly, right? So AI, artificial intelligence, has kind of two layers within it, which is what's called narrow AI, which is what we interact with today with Siri, with Alexa. It's basically input and output, essentially.
Yeah.
So a system makes a decision based on what it believes is most likely to satisfy whatever query, wherever that is, right? So this is narrow AI. But where general, as they're calling it, AI, because it's kind of IBM that very much kind of build the terminology around this, kind of very much leaders in this space. The term of general AI, which is a bit kind of mind-bending. This isn't something that exists today, but this is where AI is headed, where using machines to make decisions as if they were a human, being able to create a rational description as to why they made a decision, and also being able to make plans for the future. That, I mean, to be fair, that in itself sounds like a bit of a dystopian future, to be honest. But that's it goes to show, like, that's what people are working on behind the scenes, right? So even the AI that we're talking about today is still what's called pretty narrow AI, inputs and outputs. And underneath AI, which is kind of the last bit of description I'll give, underneath AI is other terms that are used interchangeably, which is machine learning and deep learning, which all are nested within the whole broader concept of this narrow AI thing, where machine learning is all dependent on humans. And we interact with stuff like this all the time, where where a system will ask you, were these results helpful or useful? And saying yes or no purely is you just teaching the machine whether it's good or bad, and the machine will make better decisions next time. It's learning, machine learning, but essentially it's reliant on a human to use a human bias to go, yeah, that's good, or I like it. But then deep learning is where it all goes a bit sci-fi and computer sciencey, and they're in way out of my wheelhouse, that's for sure. But like deep learning is the really interesting thing, because that's what relates to the Content Cal IQ product. But it's not like we've suddenly invented all of this. And this is the interesting thing, because it is becoming so much more acceptable. And as we've started to dip our toe in this world, it's kind of like, as you do in any world, when you start like peeling the onion, it's like, oh my word, there is so much happening in this world. So the deep learning concept is all about something called neural networks, which essentially are algorithms. Yeah, right. Algorithms that help a computer make a decision. And the whole idea of deep learning is to improve the predictability of that result being good. So whereas machine learning is about a human going, yeah, I like it, deep learning is about the computer using a whole series of algorithms to say, I reckon Chris is going to like this based on a million different parameters. And it's all about increasing that predictability and recognizing patterns, because the system already knows for all the algorithms what the patterns are. So if we ask the system to go like, why is a dog a man's best friend? It will say, oh, because they're loyal, hardworking, or whatever. And it's learned that through patterns of content that's written online. So that is where the final piece of the puzzle, why it's all kind of it's worthwhile giving this description. So we looked at kind of AI narrow and more general. It's all about narrow AI. We've looked at machine learning and deep learning. Where deep learning comes into what we're talking about today is that it's all built on this thing that's been generated called GPT-3, which is, you don't really need to know the description because it's so nerdy and boring. But GPT-3, I'd recommend every content marketer and probably anyone in any form of knowledge work needs to have a rudimentary understanding of what it is. And spending half an hour reading will give you the rudimentary understanding, because to be fair, that's probably about as much as I've done. But the really interesting thing about this, GPT-3 is a completely open source platform that anyone can build on to make products, technologies, tools, anything at all, which is what we've used for this Content IQ product. So, and that GPT-3 thing is a deep learning neural network, 175 billion different data points, which then gives you an incredible likelihood that the result is going to come back with is staggering. And this is all, GPT-3 is all about written copy. So this is going to evolve to other stuff. The potential could be like to create images for you, to create video.
Visual, audio, video. Gotcha.
Exactly that. So yeah, I would expect, and we'll talk about this as well. It's an interesting subtopic, which is, audio will be really interesting, because at the moment we're just talking about text, but audio would probably be the next most achievable thing, where a system could pretty easily take, your dulcet tones, Chris, and talk like you would. So basically you could deliver a podcast that you're never even on it, which is madness in its own right.
No, it's Black Mirror territory, isn't it? But that's one of the reasons why Black Mirror is so popular, is because a lot of it is true, is real life. So
really true, and it starts to get. It's kind of good to not get too carried away, because it does sometimes at this point when you're, I talk with it with like same with you, with a bit of like optimism and excitement, but like the whole concept of deep fakes and stuff like that fills me with dread, right? Because there are some really horrible undercurrents to all of this. But it's like with any tech, it can be used for good or evil, right? It's an incredible tool. Same with social. You and I spend our lives in social. We love it. We love the opportunity, but it also has a horrible undercurrent to it.
That's life. Yeah,
that is life, and I guess like as content marketers or whatever profession, we just got to make a decision of do we want to fight against the progress of time and tech, or do we want to take a chance to learn it and say, actually, you know what, let's figure out what the opportunity is. I've spoken for so long, I forgot what the question was, but
I think that question's served its purpose in terms of kicking things off, really. I think what you're saying is really, really interesting. I think there's that part which is, there's that part where you've got software that takes the load off, in terms of, maybe, scouring the internet for topics, and maybe, coming up, creating content automatically, no, but would you take that content and put it straight onto a platform? No, you'd have a look at it. But in the same way that AI will help the law profession massively, is that, you have a starting point, go through all that data to come up with something that's going to be right. I'm going to spend my time not crunching the data, but then taking something that I can refine and, turn to more human. Obviously that will change over the years, but I think there's that, which is about making our lives easier. But also I think when you were talking about this, was that thing about pointing you in the right direction more. We're in the business of making sure everyone in marketing should be in the business of making sure that their content is absolutely, resonates, and it's not about going, well, attention spans are short, so therefore we do short video. It's no, you find out what is, not to say there isn't a place for that, but there's you find out what is of actual interest to the people that you want to turn into your audience. I've been saying a lot recently, an audience isn't found, it's created. let's reach the target audience. No, it's you've got to create an audience by serving them content that they're going to like. So if you can use technology to help you find what people are interested in, it means that more of your content is going to hit the mark, and in turn, people will get content that isn't more interesting to them. Now, of course, there's the creepy line. You've got to be careful not to go over the Google creepy line that there's often being talked about. But for me, that's the kind of the two areas really, I think, is where that come to mind when you talk about what we just talked about.
Yeah, that whole kind of personal assistant type of thing is a really interesting concept in the way that we have personal assistants on our phone to a degree, but to have that in content marketing is going to be super powerful, right? Because ultimately it's still going to be a good while before a computer can curate quite like a human. It can't predict trends, like the most random stuff goes viral, right? Maybe I'll go on record with this, but like, tell me one time a computer can predict that a train spotter on TikTok is going to blow up, right?
But yeah, that's brilliant.
Like, yeah,
or a kid, 18-year-old kid, who basically comes up with Twitter Spaces karaoke.
Yes, that one.
Bonkers.
That
love it. Absolutely love it.
That's because what we do in content marketing is such a cool intersection between art and science. I just always feel the need for the creative mind is going to be there, but for the actual like grunt work of what we do, because there's a huge amount of what we do that is grunt work. Some people enjoy it, right? But I'm going to kind of broadly call it that. Let's call on editing, for example. So let's say if you want to edit out some nonsense that I've spoken in this podcast, in post prod.
Very unlikely, mate. Very unlikely.
But when you're doing that, right, there's brilliant AI tools that can help you do that really well and tell you where to cut things and stitch it back together, create transcripts at the same time. So there's stuff that, that's a huge time saver for a lot of the legwork. Then there's also like, writing a brief for a blog you want to have written. Say what the keywords are that you want to build a content around. You've done some keyword gap analysis and you think, right, we want to rank for X topic. Like, you're going to have to write a 500-word brief and put it to a writer to still do. So a machine can do that for you. You put in what topics you want to cover and the machine will do it. And that is where this whole GPT-3 thing and Content Cal IQ is what it's all about. Taking the load off of saying, right, you've told me you want this based on 175 billion data points. This is what I found. And of course, we have to look at this through, and this is why we're testing it and building in public, because you've got to look through it through like a curatorial eye, because you look at this, because this is totally AI, and this is one underlying problem with AI anyway, and it's good to like talk about positives and negatives, is that AI has bias. Because it's learned off all the stuff that's on the internet, of which we're humans.
It's a reflection of us. Yeah, absolutely.
Exactly. So you get through that, and I'm sure you'll see it when you start testing Content Cal IQ for yourself, Chris. Like, you'll put some stuff in, it will generate like some stuff that sounds like a blog, and you'll be like, oh my good Lord. Like, firstly, you'll be like, that's incredible. You've just saved me hours. And then slightly I'll be like, that's putting people out of a job. And then you'll look at it more and you read it more and think about it and go, well, that's not quite right. And, maybe I'll try it in a different way. Maybe it needs editing. There's no two ways.
Definitely.
Because, and one of the fundamental flaws, and this goes back to all of AI at the moment, and it goes back to that point I said about kind of general AI, what GPT-3 can't do is tell you the rationale as to why it's come up with this stuff. So whereas you and I would write a piece of content and say, I've written about this, or I've created this because I've seen this, 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 and this. So these are the reasons we've created that. And you go, fair enough, Chris. That I get it. GPT-3 doesn't do that. So that's something to be mindful of, which means, I know one of the topics we were going to discuss today is like, where does AI, and content creation tools like this sit alongside content planning is that it doesn't replace the planning element. So there's a need for a strategist, right? You're not going to replace the strategist with this quite yet. We're not there yet. You still need your ear to the ground as to what's going on. You still need Google Keyword Planner or similar tools to that. You still need to look at things like BuzzSumo, tools like that to help you understand like what are the things that are kicking off at the moment, what are the trends that we're seeing, or even just TweetDeck. Those things we can't get away from quite yet, because we still need that human eye to understand what is it that's trending at the moment. What are the kind of opportunities we can talk about? What are competitors doing and what are we not? We still need the strategist in us. So I'm conscious I'm talking loads. So
no, definitely. I think you're right. I think there's that thing about making that leap. Is that you need that person to go, look, actually that's the reason it's being done. But that actually what's being done for you is looking at all of those data points, those things that mean that you don't have to do so much work. But you can look at something and go, I know why that has been done, or you have enough data to kind of make that leap to the next thing you do. I think let's get down to, this is great. I think let's get down to the ground of things and go, okay, so what, practically speaking, let's talk about what AI, and we can talk about content CalIQ if you wanted to, but what does that look like in the next 1 to 2 years about what something like content CalIQ can do for marketeers?
So I think I'll talk more broadly, and by extension, you'll know that I'm talking about the product as well, because there'll be other tools that do this too. So where it will go is that there will be a new skill that needs to be developed in the same way that Googling is a skill, right? So if you want to get a good result out of Google, you need to know what you're asking, right? Your query means everything. So querying a product like Content CalIQ or GPT-3 is also, just as important, because you're going to need to have some baseline research. Like this, just take simple stuff like a keyword gap analysis. So you've done that, or you've had someone do that for you, and then you've gone, right, we need to rank for X term. And then we can put that into whatever AI tool we're using, Content CalIQ in this instance, and say, right, we're going to now put this and ask for, we're building in templates at the moment. So templates which help you generate content which is for the purpose you want it to be for. So a template for a title for a blog, a template for a long form piece of content, a blog, an email, a tweet, like all of those different formats. So we're thinking there's probably about 30 to 35 of them that we're experimenting with at the moment. So as long as you're, what you're trying to query, the input you're putting into the machine is solid, and you only need a sentence, but it needs to be a good sentence, then that's going to determine the results that you get. So someone that's better at querying a machine will get better results.
Okay, yeah.
So that's definitely going to be a new skill that will need to be thought of in 1 to 2 years. But then from the way that we'll create any written content, that will, I believe, be absolutely transformed, because whenever we're writing a blog, it's usually for a purpose, of which we'll have some narrative to it for sure. We'll want to edit it, but I can't see a future where someone's going to sit and spend 4 to 5 hours crafting every single word. It makes sense for a machine to create a draft for you, or a series of different drafts which you can review and go, actually, I quite like that one, build on that and develop that, which one kickstarts creativity. It's a massive, where it's like when someone gives you a hint of where you need to go, such a boon for creativity.
Yeah, definitely. Well, there'll be if we have any copywriters listening to this, some of them will be spitting their coffee out. They'll be like fuming and going, what on earth? That's like, that means we're we're out of a job. But what you do say is, for me, I think, it stops those blank page moments. It does stop you from having dodgy briefs. Briefs that are very brief, or too brief. It gives you that starting point, because really you can't not have that human element to things, in the same way that people who are trading, for example, rely on algorithms to make certain decisions for them, but ultimately it should make them better traders if they had the ability to kind of analyze what's coming from them. So yeah, there will be some copywriters going, oh my god, this is heresy.
That is very true. That is very true. But once again, I still take solace in the curatorial piece of it, and the fact of making sure that the piece does exactly what it needs to. And to be fair, like, a copywriter's stock in trade isn't just by filling words on the page. It's about making sure that narrative is right. And if something can nudge in the right direction for narrative, because quite frankly, every copywriter will want to do research, right? And should, good ones will do research before writing a piece.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Goodness me, yeah.
But fundamentally,
worked with some great ones over the years. Worked with some great copywriters over the years, and they're just like their little research teams themselves, research departments themselves. It's great.
Which is, that's a huge skill in itself. So anyone that understands research will understand the value of an algorithm that looks at 175 billion data points before bringing back something. So there's some things that a human brain just simply can't match, and it's that stuff at extraordinary scale. And that's where that whole kind of research piece is incredible, to at least just kickstart the creative process. And then off the back of that, I think there's two other areas of significant opportunity, carrying on the question about what's going to happen in 1 to 2 years. Because there's a simple, like, social media promotion of, let's say you've created a blog and you want to promote it multiple times, as you should do, right? Because ultimately, you need to make sure you drive as much traffic as possible, maximize your reach, etc. But of course, that is actually a really wasteful activity, because you're going to want to make your social media post different for every time that you're talking about that article. You want to call out something else, but essentially you're rewriting something that's already done. So you're creating a little snippet of a blog to put on a tweet or something like that. Like, that is a wasteful activity that human beings can be focused on much better stuff rather than doing that. So you can just put in your blogs, and this is something that we've built that's proved to be really popular. Put in the blogs, it will then churn out a whole load of social content that calls out pieces of that blog, along with other bits of research that creates incredibly compelling stuff. So that for me, whenever you explain that to anyone, even the most skeptical people are like, oh, it does sound pretty good, actually.
Nice.
It's just one of the things that we've got to do.
Oh, so that really is, like, for me, when you say that, I think I go, well, okay, it's about focusing on creating that kind of quality, absolute quality core content, big rock content, macro content, whatever you want to call it, hero content, and then using software to help you break that down and times 10ing the kind of the value of that content by breaking it down into micro bits of content. It means if it's a bit like if you put the query in the right place in the first time, and you put good things in first of all, you're going to get good things out. So I reckon it should then help content creators actually create better quality, higher quality content that is actually stuff that people are going to be interested in, rather than stuff that is about what can we sell to these people. So yeah, maybe that means that actually there's going to be better, higher quality content out there, because there's more support on turning that quality content into high volume content.
Mate, I'm so aligned with that. Like, for me, like, a content marketer's stock in trade really is creating that big rock content, or whatever you want to call it, cornerstone content. It has a million terminology, but I know what you mean. So that thing, that real big piece that you're super proud of, that you've painstakingly created in whatever format that ends up being, and it's our job then to like promote that as far and wide as it can possibly go, right? To try and maximize the return on all that investment of time we've made in creating the content. So, you know, in the same way we've considered AI as like an assistant in kickstarting creativity, it's absolutely there as your kind of assistant to really boost the promotion piece of that, chopping it up into multiple different variations, multiple formats, short, long form, etc., and helping you put that across multiple channels. And sorry, carry on, Chris.
Well, I think, and actually, you know, if you take that approach and you try and serialize, if you try and serialize content and you realize you can't serialize it much, that puts a big question towards the content in the first place. You know, so actually, I think that places more emphasis on that quality content, because, you know, there's only so many times you can serialize a sales message. Let's think about the key benefits of this product or working for this company. You know, but if you actually create, you know, content, like it could be a podcast, it could be that a series with employees or customers talking about, you know, sharing opinion or talking about experiences they've had, you know, straight away that content is a lot more solid and there's a lot richer. I suppose, yeah, rich is the more appropriate word, which then means it's easier to serialize, because if you have a podcast episode of, say, 30 minutes with, say, for example, a nurse, you know, talking about their experiences, but their opinion about the nursing workforce and the future of nursing, or caring for your career when you're busy caring for others, you're going to get a lot of good content from that. And so the serialization through using AI means that what you get out in that serialization is going to be quality. Whereas if you have just a very narrow, limited piece of content in the first place, you can't serialize it.
100%. Like this podcast is a fantastic example, right? So we could be creating a live transcript along with this, right? And the point that we finish recording this, the transcript is done. Like I use like otter.ai as a really good transcription.
Yeah.
So powerful. The accuracy is unbelievable. The moment that you've got that churned out, you chuck it into Content Cal IQ, and it's going to chop it up into 25 different segments of content, written content. But because it's just going to hoover that transcript and just go, yep, that's a highlight, that's a highlight, that's a highlight, because that pattern matches with all these other things, and then pulls that out to you. That, for me, you know, sends shivers down my spine, because it's so powerful.
It's absolutely, it's such a time saver. I mean, I think about that, and this is a perfect example of how it's not replacing the role. It's about just making the role easier, because to go through and find those gems, you know, it's easy to go, let's go for the thing in the first few minutes of a podcast episode, because has one got time to listen to all, you know, 40, 50 minutes of it? Having worked in print, I always listen. I make sure that anything I do, I know everything that's in that content before I hit publish. Absolutely. I think that's just something you learn from, if you print out a ton of print, you know, print collateral, you got to make sure it's right. You got to know what's in it. So I think, that's such a time saver, because I can then look at it and go, well, no, that's not interesting. But yeah, that was what was said. I remember that now. And maybe the AI shows, you know, that piece of content is maybe bigger. If you think about a word cloud, perhaps, if thinking maybe further than maybe 1 or 2 or 3, 4 years time, where you go, right, well, actually the energy of the conversation sped up at that point, which means actually that content is more valuable and more interesting. So for me, it absolutely means you can hone in on stuff like transcripts. I remember you transcribing videos to then do that Word document that you then turned into a PDF, and you put it on alongside the video as the transcript for accessibility. That took so much time. Then you hire out people to do that manually for you. But now, as you say, Otter, transcription, just like that, done. Yeah. And it takes literally, it's hours of time. And that's like, that's hours that can be spent and charged in better areas. Thinking about obviously offering marketing services is like, it actually means that it places more value on the hours you spend.
That's exactly, your hours should be spent on your creative craft, because that's what we're all here to do, not in your ability just to write. And I think there's two other elements actually, just very quickly to touch on as to where the future of this goes as well. So one of which is tone of voice. Any brand manager will obviously say we've got a great tone of voice guidelines, we've got our document, but really whether your brand is in line with that tone of voice document is entirely subjective. There really isn't anything to guard against that. Whereas the filters on, building on Content Cal IQ, but there's other tools that are already thinking about this as well. Being able to put in your tone of voice, put in your persona, who is it that you're representing? What are the words? What are the tones? Is it warm? Is it soft? Is it, targeting millennials, whatever? All of that is understood by these algorithms and by this neural network that is GPT-3. All that's understood. So you can run your content through that and it will tweak your content as a result of whatever persona that you've put in your tone of voice, that's super powerful. And this is burgeoning at the moment, right? So this is still quite a new use case, but in the future I can see, running your content through it, and in the same way that Grammarly will flag up any spelling errors, it will tell you where your tone is we don't use words like this, for example. That's super powerful. And then the final element of this, before I stop my excited spiel, is around properly and finally unlocking employee advocacy. It's an area I'm personally really passionate about. But the reality is if you're a B2B business, whatever, I was going to use an example, but I won't. But whatever B2B business you are, employee advocacy is absolutely a massive route to market for you, for your sales team, for your exec teams to be leaders in their own right, because essentially they're always going to carry more clout than the corporate social profiles. But the reality is that properly unlocking that is super, super hard, because you've got to ask CEO of your company, a bunch of salespeople, say, "Oh, can you start doing social content?" There are answers like, "Yeah, I like the idea of it," but they're never going to have the time to do it. Brilliant. Well, put in all their individual tones, the kind of thing that makes it feel like Chris is writing this, and just get GPT-3 to spit out all of the different variations of the subject matter that you want to talk about. Golden. And then all of the content is then written for those individuals so that it can finally unlock that as a use case. To be fair, that's the biggest opportunity in front of B2B businesses as far as social media goes, in my opinion. And that, when you get rid of the creative barriers of I don't have enough time to write something, and I don't know what to write about, both of those two biggest challenges of the creative barrier and the time barrier both disappear. And that truly unlocks opportunity.
Yeah, you're right. It's I think it's a bit like, if you ask someone could you write a blog post? For us, it's like, okay, it's going to take them time to do it. So you go, okay, well, how can we find ways of making that easier for them? Let's jump on a Zoom call and we'll have a conversation and then we'll transcribe it. It's taking it that much further by going, look, don't give someone a blank page. Say, can you do something for us? Give them a starting point, because straight away, maybe in part because it's done by technology, they'll go, hang on a minute, we kind of do it for the human race kind of thing. Go, no, actually it needs to be like this, this, and this. That's a lot easier to do that, to change something, that is to do something from nothing. So fascinating GPT-3, dearie me. But it's as I said at the beginning, kind of I'm always leaning towards the more optimistic side of things, and I think if this is gonna, this will make our lives easier. But I think, going back to my point, I think is the key thing is that I think it enables people to make higher quality content by having more insights that guide the creation of that content, but also means you can you don't have to spend so much time creating the volume of content, but creating the core content, the big rock content, the macro content, or whatever you want to call it, which then means the stuff you use technology to serialize is that content is a lot better, because any content that has no depth or very little depth and very little richness you'll get nothing out of the software, out of the AI. Great. Well, yeah, conscious of time, but that's been a fantastic, chat. I think definitely in terms of keeping an eye on developments on things. Absolutely, we'll get you back on the pod and have chats in the new year. I think what I'll do is I will drop in any links you send over to me, Andy, so people can take a look and see what Content Cow's about, of course, but also see what find out more a bit about Content Cow IQ as well. So yeah, thanks very much. Really appreciate it, mate.
Anytime, Chris. Yeah, anytime, mate.
Thanks for listening. And if you enjoyed what you heard, then please feel free to subscribe. And it would be awesome if you could leave a review as well. It really does help.